Hello and welcome back to the Opposites Abroad podcast, the podcast covering all things travel. Charlie Bosco here up in a wonderfully warm and sunny BC. TT down in what I assume is a wonderfully warm and sunny Denver, because it normally is. And you just got back from somewhere that's even more reliably warm and sunny. You just got back from 3 weeks in Bali.
I did.
And that's the longest trip you've ever taken as an adult, hey? What was that experience like to be gone that long?
It was a little long, actually, to be honest. I
like your honesty.
Yeah, you know, we've talked about before, but you and I both work and have other obligations, and even though we travel a lot, you know, neither one of us are trust funders or have some crazy income that we can just do things without working. So for me, I travel a lot, but I'm really, really cautious with my time. So I do a lot of little weekend trips. I do maybe 4 week-long trips a year, and I get pretty good vacation time, but I don't really get huge amounts of time because then I wouldn't be able to travel as much of my other stuff, and it's not worth it for me to do like one trip a year, which is what would happen if I did big trips. So for this trip, I retired in January, and I had this plan, and I actually originally had it planned to be a month because I was going to go to Taiwan at the end for a week. And then when I ended up getting another job, I whittled down Taiwan, and then the rest of it I really couldn't whittle down without a substantial loss of money. So I went ahead and just went for it and got the time off from work, and it was a really, really, really fun trip. But I'm kind of ADD, and especially if I'm somewhere where I can't go wander around a lot, it's a lot for me. I think I could do 3 weeks in London if it was not super hot, or in Paris, or maybe even Tokyo. But 3 weeks in a paradise where it's too hot to wander around during the day was pretty tough, I thought.
Yeah, I get that. But, I mean, Bali is a pretty appealing looking place, and it's incredibly famous, given that it's not a country. It's a province, essentially, of Indonesia. And my understanding is that there's one big island, confusingly enough, called Bali, and then a series of smaller islands. But Indonesia is made up of 13,000 islands, of which Bali and its associated islands are one part. But it's disproportionately famous. I'm sure more people have heard of Bali than Jakarta. I'm sure more people have heard of Bali than Indonesia, actually. Why is it so famous? Why the reputation?
It's weird to me that it's as famous as it is. Not that it's not a paradise, not that I didn't really enjoy it, but Indonesia is supposed to have some of the most beautiful scenery in the world, away from Bali. But Bali is the tourist area. I would say it's kind of like, I would call it Australia's Cancun. It's not a place where it looked to me like a lot of people go for culture and to experience things. They go to hang out at a resort. And I get it. I mean, people go to Tahiti for the same reason. They go to Fiji for the same reason. It's not really a South Pacific, but it kind of has that feel with the heat and the beaches and the monkeys and all that kind of stuff. So how did it get as famous as it is? Honestly, I don't know. My assumption is it probably has something to do with Australians touristing there, and then when they travel around talking about how great it is, and then Americans and Canadians and other people wanting to go there because they talk about what a big paradise it is. Yeah, it's a trippy place for that reason, and hard for me to wrap my mind around just why it's so famous and such a must on Instagram and for people. I don't know. I don't totally get it.
Well, what inspired you to go for so long?
Yeah, I had a friend that wants to go, and I'd always heard about it. I knew someone before that would go there on vacation that lived in Jakarta, and would always talk about how great it is, and it's close and it's cheap, and it just kind of became one of those places that felt like a place I should go, and I really want to go everywhere. So there's not really a place that you'd say, you could say Belarus, and I'd be like, I really want to go there. Like there's not a place that I don't want to go unless it's like a war zone. Um, so I don't know. It's just one of those iconic places. I'm also at the point in travels because I'm at 88 countries, and I'm at the point where I really want to hit all the things that are kind of like the main places in the world that you hear people talk about. Um, I've done I've gone to a lot of very obscure places. Like, you and I met in North Korea. We did a Taiwan place. Not that Taiwan's obscure, but it's not a touristy place like Bali. And I've done some places in South America and Europe that aren't necessarily super touristy. Like, I spent a week last year in Serbia when 99% of Americans would go to Croatia. Um, and it's just kind of at the point where I'm just like, you know what, I need to start not just doing obscure places and do some of these iconic places, and Bali's just an iconic place.
And what is it like? I mean, that's a big question. Maybe if you answer that, then the podcast's over. But yeah, tell me your first impressions, and then maybe we could dial into some of those in more detail.
Okay, well, let me start with just saying how far it is for like you and I to get there. So for Australians, it's about a 3-hour flight, which is nothing, and you just see Australians everywhere. I mean, just unbelievable throngs of Australians. I heard one American accent the whole time I was there. I didn't hear a single British accent. And there you get people from China or other parts of Indonesia, or I heard a lot of Koreans. So I think for those kind of people, it makes a lot of sense. People that live in that side of the world, because they don't have a lot of the same environment of a combination of beautiful beaches, jungle, incredibly genuinely kind and helpful and sweet people, the Balinese, and unbelievably cheap. And when you mix those things together, really nice people, paradise location with beautiful weather, and unbelievably cheap, and you're going to get Western tourists and you're going to get Eastern tourists from other places that want to go there.
Yeah, it's a winning combination, as Cancun and Puerto Vallarta will testify from Mexico.
Yeah, exactly. And I must have said 100 times when I was there, this is Australia's king here. I mean, it's just so similar in ways, and for that it makes a lot of sense. But for us, I would never discourage anybody from going to Bali, but I really felt after I left that if you're American or Canadian, or probably from South or Central America, I don't know that it makes a lot of sense unless you're like me, where you just want to go everywhere and experience everything. Just my flight there, it's about a 30 hours door to door to get from my house to the hotel. I have to fly 2.5 hours from Denver to LA or San Fran, another 17 hours to Singapore, and then 2.5 hours to Bali. And then the roads are so terrible, depending on where you're staying, it can take you a couple hours to get to your hotel. And it is just such a massive distance. When I can fly direct from Denver and get to Cancun in like 2.5 hours.
Yeah. So, I mean, is it not a particularly cultural experience, Bali?
I think it is if you search it out. If you stay on the resort, no, not really. If you get into the little towns, somewhat. The problem that with it is, and I was surprised, is it's really a pretty big area, and things are really spread out, and traffic is terrible. It's cars everywhere, scooters everywhere. There's no street lights, so it's just jammed in and honking. Really narrow streets, broken thin sidewalks, so it's very difficult to walk. Or there's scooters parked on the sidewalks. You got to step into traffic to walk around if you go into one of the little towns. So and then the road system there's not like highways or long distance roads really. It's mostly like jaggedy. You go a block, you turn half a block, you go a block, you turn this, and you go there in this alleyway. So they use Grab there instead of Uber, which is exactly the same thing. But you'll be at the resort, and the first week I stayed at the Hilton Bali on the beach. Then I went to the Conrad Bali, which is also on the beach, for 2 nights. And then I switched to a jungle villa about 2 hours from the Hilton, which is up higher into Bali. So I really tried to get a varied experience of nice places to stay. Like I wasn't like, I'm going to get a varied experience and I'm going to stay at the Conrad tonight. Tomorrow I'm staying in a dorm at the hostel. Like it wasn't like that, but I did try to get a combination of beach and jungle. And in either one of the places I was, you'd look at the map and you'd go, oh, it's 1.8 miles away, or it's 5 miles away. And you'd say, well, 1.8 miles, that should take a few minutes to get to. And it takes 25 minutes. And then you're 5 miles away. We went across the island one night to go to a temple, and it took well over an hour. And I think it was like 5 kilometers or something, and it took forever. And it was just constant jagged roads going back and forth and slamming on brakes because the roads are too narrow. And the way back was terrifying because it was so dark, and you couldn't see what was around the corner, and some of the streets are only really wide enough for one car. And it's just, someone messaged me when I was there and said, do you think it's kind of like Cancun where you just don't really want to leave the resort? And unfortunately I kind of say kind of,
but for very different reasons, I guess. It's not sketchy, Bali.
It's not sketchy. It seems safe. Now they have had some stuff. I mean, there's been some terrorist attacks, things like that, but it doesn't seem sketchy. It seems honest. It doesn't seem like you're going to get robbed. People are nice. They don't pester you when you walk around particularly. It's not like, some places where you walk around, they're like, come into my store, come around, and they follow you down the street. They might say something to you, and if you just say no thank you, they'll just leave you alone. Like, it doesn't seem like you're going to get jacked. But it's just the logistics of traveling around is so difficult. And it got to the point where towards the end, I was like, I really don't want to go try to do anything today. Like, I really would just like to stay at the resort and relax and read or whatever. And that, as you know, you and I are similar in that way. I'm not great at just sitting around all the time. Like, I'm not someone who goes and sits at a beach and sits at the pool all day long for a week. Like, I start getting really antsy and wanting to go wander around the streets or go do something. And for me to be like, okay, I'm kind of over this. And then it's so hot, so you go out during the day, and if you try to walk around, it's covered in sweat. You can't really walk very well on the sidewalks, and it just becomes pretty exhausting.
Yeah, I get that. You and I are similar in that respect. We spent a summer living on the smaller of the two Maltese islands, and basically the whole point of being on Gozo, which is the name of the island, is you just do nothing, and I just couldn't deal with that. So over the course of the summer, I made a point of circumnavigating the island on foot, and then did it on bike, and then anywhere I could find some interesting looking cliffs, I'd like rent a boat for the day and go around and check out these cliffs. I basically couldn't just do nothing. So I totally get you. And by the way, if anyone's ever got 5 days not in the height of summer and they want a really unusual 5-day hike, staying in nice little hotels and circumnavigating Gozo is a pretty good option.
I would love that.
It was great, but the problem is we were there in the height of summer, so I would get the bus to a village, hike to the next village, get the bus home, whatever, but it was so hot. But if you went in October or something, it'd be amazing. Anyway,
I was supposed to visit you on that trip, but COVID screwed it all up, and we couldn't get out. Actually, I'm going to go back, aiming to go back for a month next summer. So. Oh, really?
You have to come.
Well, I would love that, and then we can do a podcast about it.
Yeah, exactly, and we won't do nothing. I'll show you around. Anyway, Gozo is a very special place. Maybe we could do a podcast on it one day, but I digress. Bali, is there kind of, if you were to seek out cultural interest, stay away from the tourists, are there places you could go in Bali that would be that cultural experience, like going to an Asian city? Or has it all, I guess, a bit like much of the coast of Spain has just become tourism and you almost can't escape it? Is Bali like that, or do you think you could get away from the tourists and just see something different?
I think you can get away from some of that stuff. I think Bali is Hindu, where the rest of Indonesia is Muslim, and Bali's about 80% Hindu, and I'd say it's probably the most religious place I've ever been, in which can sound kind of bad because it sounds like there's horrible rules and it's very judgy and stuff, but it's not like that. They're just very nice people. But there's little woven baskets in front of every store with little offerings. There's every hotel has its own temple, Hindu temple. The people are just very, very nice. They're the rest of Indonesia, I would think would be very, very different. Sorry, what was your question?
Can you get away from the tourists?
So as far as getting away from the tourists, you can, but I think it's difficult because there's really not a lot of sites. Most of the sites would be temples, like Hindu temples, and the big ones are big tourist sites with a ton of tourists. The evening that I went to that temple across from on the other side of the island was not my favorite evening ever. You got to this temple, it was just throngs and throngs of white people walking up to see this temple, but there's nothing to see when you really get up there. I don't even know that it's really a working temple anymore, and a lot of it you can't get into. It's like gated off, and there's monkeys everywhere that will steal your phone and steal your hat, so you have to be super careful even trying to take pictures of anything. And it's 1,000,000 degrees, and then you leave and you really don't learn anything because there's no signs or anything. It's just kind of wandering around a little bit, and some of the pictures are very, like, I guess, Instagrammable, but I'm not someone who goes places to take a picture of a temple or nature that I can just Google. Like, I try to take other pictures of other things. And then you get out of it, and then it's impossible to get a grab because there's so many people there, and you've got to wander way down away from it to try to get a grab. And it was just not my thing. I think it's almost like when you go to Europe and you go to a cathedral and you're like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. And you just wander around and you're looking at the art and you're looking at how tall it is and you're just astounded. And after about 5 cathedrals, you're like, I'm over it. like, like, I'm just over it. And that's kind of the way that stuff is too. I would probably recommend someone, if you're interested in that, find a smaller temple that's not a really touristy one and go see that and skip the big ones. There's that big temple that you'll see on Instagram all the time where they've got this like 2 spires and people, it looks like a mirror and people get their picture in it. I looked at it. It was about a 2-hour drive from the hotel to get to it, which means it's probably 3-hour drive. And then it says online that it's about a 2-hour wait to take that picture. And I'm like, there's not a picture in the world that I'm going to wait in a line for 2 hours to take, especially in the hot. And I don't think even in the perfect weather, in the perfect place, I'm going to stand there waiting for 2 hours to take a picture that I may look at once another time in my life. Like, I just think it's a waste.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, yeah, I can totally see that. I remember when I was guiding, we used to work in the Himalayas, used to go to a lot of monasteries, and one of the most common altitude complaint is AMS, acute mountain sickness, and it's kind of the beginnings of more serious altitude sickness. But we used to say that we had acute monastery sickness, AMS, because you just think, it was cool the first time we went to a monastery and saw all these monks.
Yeah.
But I'm not religious. I personally don't think that spending your life in a monastery is a great choice, especially seeing as in Buddhist culture you're obliged to send one of your sons to be a monk. So a lot of them were probably originally there against their will. And once I actually started thinking about it, and once I'd seen a couple of monasteries, you're kind of over it. I know that's an incredibly first world thing to say, but it's just not that interesting to go to another dusty place with monks in it. So I do get it.
Yeah, and I like some Eastern religion. I find a lot interesting, in some ways more interesting than Western religion, but you still get fatigued. I would say if you are going to Bali, I would read up a little bit on Hinduism, so you kind of have a little understanding of what it is. It's pretty much the oldest religion in the world, or the oldest major religion in the world, which is fascinating. And the thing I like about Hinduism is you really don't hear about Hindu terrorists or Hindu countries starting wars. You know, it's a pretty peaceful religion. And I would say that I did come out of it with probably a little bit. I don't think I came out with much more understanding of the religion itself, but I came out with probably more of appreciation for people of that religion, because I did find them very peaceful and nice. And that's the other thing too, is everyone pretty much speaks English, but they don't speak English very well. So their English tends to be what their skill set is. So it's like you're at the hotel, their English is how to serve breakfast. You're at a temple, maybe it's how to like take the ticket and tell you where the bathroom is, and you start asking other questions, like deeper questions. It just completely throws them off, and they have no clue. I went to breakfast, and the lady seemed to speak really well English, or really good English, and yeah, I know, better than me, obviously. And I tried to talk to her about something else, and she was like so confused, had no idea. I had to like use Google Translate, and it was like a pretty simple thing. And I think they're just kind of in like, it's like tourism English, like, or I know if you come in my store, I know how to sell you this, but don't ask me where anything is that's outside of my scope of what I know, because I have no idea how to say it. So I felt like it was kind of hard to learn some things, because it's hard to chat with locals, if that makes sense. And
yeah.
And
so you started on the beach. Are the beaches all they're cracked up to be?
Yes. Yeah.
In what are they? White sandy beaches?
No, they're not white. They're at least where I was, they were more like tan beaches. And the Hilton was a very small beach, and they had built like rock breakers, I think probably to stop erosion, and they had another breaker out, I think, to keep the big waves from coming in, either for erosion or for the safety of like the kids at the beach. But it was a really nice little beach. It's amazing how you go to Paradise and there's so much garbage everywhere, but it's not necessarily the fault of the people that live there. It's a lot of it's from the ocean that washes in, and all the resorts have locals that they hire that go out early in the morning, 5-6 in the morning, and they're picking up all this garbage off the beach to make it presentable for all their guests, which is kind of a bummer, because I'm not someone who goes and hangs out at the beach during the day, and I have zero interest in going out and getting bitten by sharks and stung by what God knows what. But I do like going and walking on the beach, either early in the morning or in the evening. I love that. And when you go in the morning, yeah, there's a lot of trash you'd have to dodge while they're out there picking it up. And I actually filled up my pocket, two times in particular that I went on a long walk with little pieces of broken glass that was in the sand, so that other people wouldn't step on them later, or little kids wouldn't step on them. And then I went and emptied them in the trash when I got back. So that's kind of a bummer. But the beaches are beautiful, and the waves are beautiful. There's tons of people surfing. They're big waves. The Conrad that I went to is more like a big huge stretch of beach, and it really was beautiful. But it's not white sand, clear blue water like you think of like the Maldives or the Bahamas. It's not like that. But I'm trying to think, what beach would I really compare it to? Maybe like a beach in Australia would maybe be similar, but probably a little better weather maybe.
And the sea's warm.
Yes, I thought the sea was warm. The pools are generally warm on their own, and nice, and it's not like, nothing's worse than you go to Paradise and you go use a pool and it's ice cold water. It was really nice.
And what about the jungle when you moved inland? What's that like?
The place is beautiful. The villa was gorgeous. People were super nice. It was absolutely paradise. I had a full villa with it's like a kind of a studio with a living room, bedroom connected, and then a big bathroom with a huge tub and a shower, and then there was a sitting area outside, and then it had its own pool, and it was right on the edge of a kind of a cliff that went down into where a river was, and it was all jungle, and it was beautifully maintained. I had a butler that I could WhatsApp for whatever I wanted. Like, I need more ice. I need a golf cart to give me a ride to whatever, and they were there in 2 seconds. It was really paradise. But I learned a couple things on the trip. One, I love the jungle in movies. Like I love seeing Indiana Jones go through the jungle. I love I love seeing whatever it is in the jungle. I think it's awesome, but when you're actually in the jungle, what it is tons of horrible insects, weird lizards and frogs and stuff that get in your room, and just and super heat, super muggy, and I don't know. I think the fantasy of the jungle life is kind of better than the reality jungle life for me personally, but it really was cool. Now, if I was taking like a family, I would do the beach because the beach is like the best thing in the world for kids, and it's totally free once you're there. The jungle, I think, would be boring for kids, but if you're a little bit older, or you want solitude, or you're more private and you don't want, when I was at the villa, I thought this would be a good place for someone that's famous because
no one knows you there.
No one knows you're there. You can skinny dip in the pool. No, there's not going to be anybody trying to take your picture, and you could really just have a great vacation and not have to deal with anybody. I mean, you can have them; they'll come grill your food at your villa, and everything's super reasonably priced. But if you have a family, I'd say go to the beach.
But what you just mentioned it, one thing that you hear about Bali, and you've mentioned it, is that the cost of living is very low.
Unbelievably cheap. And so if you're Australian or from New Zealand or something, I think Bali's a no-brainer. I think it's an absolute no-brainer to take like your kids on a beach trip. For you and I, the flights are expensive. The distances are so massive. I still just don't think it makes a ton of sense for us unless you're just trying to check it off your list. But when you're there, it is unbelievably cheap. I mean, even staying at a really fancy hotel is a couple $100 US. And then you go into town, massages are $8, $10. And it's not like what people would think of as like Southeast Asia, where it's like sketchy massages. I mean, there's legit massages where you keep your underwear on, and it's nice, and you don't have to worry about like, oh my god, where am I going in and what's going to happen when I go in there. It's not like that, because even though it's Hindu, it's still a Muslim country, and I think that's something people need to understand, is that it's not a debauchery place. And I know some people go there to party, and there's some of that, but you have to be really careful there. Like, you get caught with drugs, you get caught trying to do prostitution, you get caught trying to do something that you might be able to get away with in another country, you're going to go and get thrown in prison, and you could get thrown in prison for years. So it is not a place to go party. And if I was like Australian and I had teenagers or people, your college students, and they were like, we're going to Bali for the weekend, I would give them like such a huge lecture. Because about not getting in trouble there. I mean, their customs at the airport is super intense. Like, they're really looking for stuff. They do not mess around with stuff like drugs, not at all.
Oh, the border was tight.
Borders tight. They really try to fight things coming in. I mean, and I would just it is a Muslim country. It has the biggest amount of Muslims of any country in the world. And so even though it seems like paradise, and you've got people and they're walking around, in bathing suits, and there is alcohol, and there's parties and that stuff, you really have to don't forget where you are, and not get caught up in, oh, this is just paradise and I can do whatever I want, I'm on vacation. I would be very careful there.
Did I ever tell you the story about when I got a massage in Taiwan the day after? I think you'd already left and you'd already gone to the airport. Did I tell you about that?
Yes, but tell it again.
Well, so the last night when we met up in Taiwan for 3-4 nights or something.
Yeah.
And the last night you were flying out, and I just really was in the mood for life, and I ended up in a whiskey bar. I mean, nothing is ever good has ever come of ending up in a whiskey bar. Got sat next to some nice enough guy, and we basically got hosed together. And I went back to the hotel. I didn't see you the next day, but I obviously slept in a really uncomfortable position, like slept on my arm or something, real drunk sleep, so you're just dead. And the next day I was getting increasingly sore arm and shoulder, and I really thought I damaged myself, and I was trying to find a massage in Taiwan, And I kept seeing, I went on Google and it's kind of, each one I went to, I thought, oh no, that's a one where you were supposed to end up with your underwear off. And I found one that looked pretty bona fide. It was on the ground floor at street level. And I went in and lay down, and it was just immediately obvious that I was supposed to take my underwear off. And this poor woman, I mean, it's not a great lifestyle anyway, but she then had to pretend to know how to fix shoulders.
Yeah.
And I had to pretend not to realise that I just walked into a brothel. And she did a pretty admirable job trying to fix my shoulder.
And how'd you know? Because what she was wearing, or because she kissed you, or what happened?
It was the fact that she was in lingerie. No, because when I explained, she just looked at me so blankly. She spoke really good. She just clearly was
like,
thinking,
you want what touched? Your shoulder?
You want a shoulder massage? Like, she looked at me as if to say, seriously, like, is it not obvious what we're doing here?
Yeah.
But by then I was in and I didn't know what to do, and so I just lay there and she just kind of, poked around on my shoulder. It was so awkward. Luckily at the time I was working in sports, and I managed that evening. I flew to Xiamen in China, and I met up with the physio from one of the sports teams, and I made up some BS story about how my arm had come to hurt. I didn't say, well, basically I just got completely hammered and fell asleep lying on my arm.
Yeah.
But just reminding me.
And Bali's not like, I'm sure if you hunt it out, there's probably some of that. There is everywhere in the world. Someone's always going to fill some niche that nobody else has filled to make money, but it really doesn't feel like that. I mean, the other thing I would say, and this is kind of the controversial thing, if you don't love Australians,
does anyone love Australians? Oh, sorry.
I don't know that do they love themselves, but and as an American, I see a lot of similarities between your typical American and your typical Australian. I mean, we're both from England, and Americans, we're not descendants from criminals, which I guess is good, but there's very similar things in appearance, and it's just, I don't know. But
I think if we were to sweep with a broad brush, you would say that Americans and Australians at times aren't the most culturally sensitive and culturally aware people in the world.
I would say yes. I would say people don't generally say who's the best dressers in the world? Americans and Australians.
No one's ever said that.
And now I would say
who is the quietest and most respectful?
Oh
people?
yeah. And
it's not Australians and Americans.
And and you see a lot of. It's hard to say it. I find a lot of Australian men to be very hyper masculine, and you get that in some in America too. But it seems like it's probably, to me, a little bit more prevalent in Australia. So you're there, and you've got these hyper masculine guys walking around, and it's just not my favorite vacation thing. It's like, if I want to hang out with a bunch of Australians, I'll go to Australia, and there's just stuff like, it's almost too casual in a way. I tend to say, like, when I travel, like, what would James Bond be doing right now? What would James Bond be wearing right now? And James Bond would wear shoes to breakfast. James Bond would wear a shirt to the bar, and so some of that stuff is like, it's almost like the Americans that really bother me or embarrass me the most are some of the same Australian types that bother me the most, and a lot were there. And I actually said something to a guy at breakfast, and I said, I was at the Conrad, which is a 5-star resort, super fancy, where I'm at breakfast. It's a super, super fancy breakfast, and guy walks in with no shoes on, and he's at the buffet getting food, and he walked by me, and I looked at him, I said, "Did you forget your shoes?" And he looks at me and he goes, "You don't need shoes here, mate." And I thought, you know what? You're at a super fancy 5-star hotel. Everybody else is wearing shoes. Like, I just thought it was
shoes on.
I just thought it was so classless, and that kind of stuff drives me crazy. So because of that, I kind of liked my jungle villa.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I didn't have to deal with that stuff. And I actually text you when I was there, like, we should do a travel etiquette show. And I text you, I think, when I was at breakfast, because I was so irritated by someone not wearing shoes at breakfast, because it's just so gross. I mean, so yeah, and nothing against Australia. I've been to Australia, really like Australia. It's just, I don't know. I don't know how to.
No,
put
I mean,
it in
I'm
words.
sorry to say it to your fellow countrymen, but yeah, Americans aren't always. If you're in a European capital of culture,
Yeah,
the Americans and the Australians aren't always the best tourists.
yeah.
Um,
Well, and that's why I'm a big believer in dressing nice, dressing appropriately when you travel. Kind of off to a side thing, but I remember one time I went to Canada with a buddy, and I'm wearing a sport coat on the plane. I'm dressed very nicely. He's just dressed like a normal American. And when we went through the airport, everybody we walked up to for like security would say hello to him and bonjour to me. Because they
thought you were Quebecois.
They just assumed I was French Canadian because I was dressed well, and they assumed he was either American or non-French Canadian because he wasn't. And I thought it was so interesting because we were together, and we were walking together and stuff, and they just look at him and go hello, and then they go bonjour.
Oh, that's nice.
And I took it as a big compliment because
Yeah.
Americans tend to not be known for dressing nice, and you hear stories of going to a 3 Michelin star restaurant in France and Americans dressed like crap, and it's like, yeah, just kind of know where you are.
You'd get on with Monaco. It's illegal to have no shirt on in public.
Even for women?
It depends what your class is in public. Yeah, they're just ruthless on
Yeah.
dress codes and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I get really weird about that stuff, like men wearing baseball hats to fine dining just drives me crazy. And I'll say
that scene
I'll
in
say
The
stuff to people.
Sopranos
Yes, I do.
where he goes and breathes over that guy.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll say stuff to people, just like I'll say stuff to people if they walk out of the bathroom and don't wash their hands. Like just don't be gross. Just have some class. Some
I
side
reckon if
some
you,
side
if
thoughts.
you tell someone, they stay told. Those of you who don't follow TT on Instagram, although if you don't follow TT on Instagram, how on earth do you find this podcast? But yeah, you're probably not someone I would be queuing up to take on. So if you told me to take my hat off,
So yeah. Check me out, Traveler Tattooed. But
we digress.
So I have kind of mixed feelings on Bali. I loved it. I had a great 3 weeks. It was really relaxing. I don't know that I'm dying to go back. I don't know that I will really go back unless I just happen to be in the area and maybe go for a few days. You have to be really careful there not to get sick because the water is really bad. You can't brush your teeth with the water. So you have to be really careful. They call it Bali belly, which is kind of like Montezuma's revenge or Pharaoh's revenge that people get traveling, and people can get really, really sick if you brush your teeth with the water. And as we talked about before, like I wouldn't order salads. I'd be very careful getting any cocktails unless it's at your hotel and you're very sure they're using bottled water to make the ice. Like I would drink beer and bottled water and cooked food, and you just have to be really careful. There's a whole cottage industry there where you can call doctors to your hotel room when you're sick, and they'll put IVs in you, and it just can absolutely ruin your vacation if you get sick.
Okay. Well, hey, speaking of which, it's coming up for 6 o'clock here, and you just mentioned a beer, so we should probably wrap this up because I feel like the fridge is calling my name. Right.
Deal.
But it's super interesting. Bali's just one of those places that everyone's heard of Bali, but not many people really know much about it, and I think it's really interesting to get a bit of insight. So
yeah, I would say if you're American and you want to go to somewhere that is, you get some culture and it's cheap. In Asia, go to Bangkok, maybe Vietnam. I think it's a cool place. I don't think it's worth it for us. I really don't.
Okay,
and,
fair enough.
And I think when I got home and I counted 17 bug bites on my right foot from being in the jungle, I just thought, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I should go to a city.
Yeah, I get that. Well, it was never honestly very high on my list, so it probably will remain not that high. But I am available for trips to Bali should anyone want to pay me to go. That's not me saying no to free trips, but yeah. So we've got some interesting episodes coming up in the next few weeks, hey?
Yes.
Including our first rock star. We've got a rock star on. I'm not sure he would appreciate being called a rock star, but that's what we're going to call him. And when we do the interview, I'm going to refer to him as a rock star and just see how he reacts.
Yeah, I think that's going to be super, super exciting.
But we've got various guests coming up, various topics to discuss. So a lot coming down the pipe on the podcast. And yeah, that was fun. And welcome home.
Thank you. I'm here for a few days and I'm off to Vegas this weekend, and then so we'll have to do a Vegas one soon too.
Well, the old saying, "What goes in Vegas stays in Vegas." I'm not sure.
We'll keep it clean.
It sounds like a deal. All right, speak next week.
Okay, sounds good.